Nobody? How do they look on me? I can't see anybody. I don't. Here, I'm going to put them over here for right now. Okay. Have you ever been around somebody that is so phony? Have you been around somebody that is just so, flattering that you go, ooh. You know what I'm talking about? Right. They have it in some movies sometimes. They have the antagonist that he or she will antagonize people, but when they're around adults or when they're around somebody important, they just flatter and they're just such a fake. Right. Eddie Haskell, that goes back a ways. So, some here might not even know who Eddie Haskell is, right? Yeah, so very, very good. And Eddie Haskell. I want to talk on a text today, but I want to, this is known as a text that would be more negative, but we want to flip it and turn to the message that is there for us, what we should be. Right. And so we're going to try to turn this in, and because of the length of the text, I might be watching that wicked clock back there and might have to cut some things out. Thank you for that clock, but it always goes so fast. I think they have a little button they push on it and click it through too fast for me. But it's in Matthew 23, and Jesus talks about the hypocrite. And so we want to turn this into positive because there's some great stuff there for us and great really challenges for what we can be. Let's read right now just verses 2 through 4. Saying, the scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Therefore, all that they tell you, do and observe. But do not do according to their deeds, for they say things and do not do them. They tie up heavy burdens and they lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are unwilling to move them with so much as a finger. Hypocrites. This is the text on hypocrites. And you know what a hypocrite is. We've talked about it many times, but a hypocrite is a play actor. They're actors. And so they are just acting something they're really not. They're putting on this show. It's putting on a mask. Now, if we're not careful, all of us can wear masks sometime. And sometimes I call it, there's a positive look at it. You wear different hats. Sometimes, ladies, you wear the mom hat. And then sometimes you have to wear the wife hat. And then you have to wear the doctor hat. And, then you have to wear the church hat when you're at church. And so, but that's maybe a little different than a mask, because a mask is more of the idea of being phony. Right. The mask is more like having something that you're putting on or that you're covering up. Right? And so that's what Jesus Christ is talking here. And the amazing thing in this text, to me, is right here in the beginning when it says, all that they tell you to do, do and observe. So he's saying, a lot of the message could be good, but we get lost in putting on that that's what we are, when really inside we're not that. That's a challenge. Now, I was a little troubled, and again, it says do and observe. Two words almost the same, so what's the difference? Do is the word poieo, it means to do, like we would think of it, that you just take action and you do something. But the word to observe is it's tereo, and that's the word it's usually translated to keep, but more correctly, it's translated to guard. And so he's telling you these are some things now that you should be doing, and you should even guard them in your life. It's a strengthened form of keep is what it is. So it's not just keep, it's a little bit tougher than that. And stronger than that, I should say. So that's kind of amazing to me that he's looking at the Pharisees, and usually when we think of them, we see them doing things that are phony, are hypocritical. We see them doing things that are judgmental, that are legalistic. And the word Pharisee, matter of fact, is so bad that we say when somebody's a Pharisee, that's a bad thing, right? It's pretty negative. You say, oh, they're just Pharisees. And so here when it says, well, do and observe them, it's kind of a surprise to me. Because he's saying, even them, they had, get this now, they had a right look at some of their theology, but they had a problem with duology. So your best theology that you have in this text is duology, is do the right things. And we want to take a look at some of these and kind of get a handle on them. So we know we should be holy. They practiced holiness, but the problem is they were phony in it. They practiced giving. They practiced being helpful. They practiced being the outward act of loving, but Jesus said they had a problem that it wasn't real. So what we need to do is let's get real. I rarely entitle a message, but I did on this one, is that we should be real. Let's get real. Matter of fact, say that with me once. Let's get real. I want you to think about that because that is something so important that as Christians, what they see in us is what we are. Who are they supposed to see in us? More than us, they're supposed to see Jesus Christ. Amen. So let's be challenged in that with this message here. Let's take a look at it and see that's what he's talking about. You've heard me say this before a long time ago, and I realized I haven't said this for a while. But your talk talks and your walk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. Right. Now say that a couple times. I'm kidding, but that's such a truth saying that your walk proves your talk. Right. And the problem with this text, Jesus is saying they're good talkers, but they're not good walkers. Right. And so maybe sometimes it's better not to talk at all if you're not going to back it up with your walk. Okay, so you want your walk to be good. And you want to follow through with it, is the idea. We're going to read a big text, and I already apologized. The clock is going ticking fast. And we probably won't get through the text, so I might skip some things to get to something I think is real important to say. But we're going to try to do as much as we can and go fast. Verses 5 through 12. I'm going to read all of that. 5 through 12, William. Let's go through. But they do all their deeds to be noticed by men, for they broaden their phylacteries and lengthen the tassels of their garments. Let's stop there a minute. Let me explain that. I don't know if you know what the phylactery is and the tassels. The phylacteries was a custom that they had in the Old Testament, that they'd have a leather pouch and they could put verses in them or four different scripture references, and they could wear it as a prayer thing on their forehead or on their arm, right about it, where the bicep is, just above the elbow. And they did this to be noticed by people, and it became this phony thing. The tassels now, I've actually thought that'd be cool to have those, but I could see where it's so abused again, and that's what he's saying, it gets abused. On the end of a tassel, they would have blue ribbons. And if you go back into the book of Numbers, it has a reference of what that was supposed to be. When you saw a brother or sister, we'd say now in Christ, but a Jew or Jewess, and you saw this tassel, it was to remind you of the law of God. It was to remind you that we are a holy people. So every time you saw that, you saw something of God. I just thought, I still think that's cool. That you'd have that representation. And so what it says is, look, it says, for they broaden their phylacteries instead of having a small, and they lengthen the tassels of their garments. Right. You know, the length of your tassel or the size of your phylactery doesn't make you better. Right. And that's where we get lost. We get lost in this outward appearance, Jesus is saying, but it's not happening on the inside. And so let's get real. Let's get real, and let's have the real us be in us, even if the outside. You know, I mean, we're so glad everybody put on foo-foo dust this morning, and you smell good, and that you dress up a little bit. That's all good. We all appreciate that. But what's really important, God says, is I want to see your inside. Amen. Man sees the outside, but God, what did Samuel says? He sees your inside. And that's what's important. So we've got to be working on our insides. And really, listen, if you work on your inside, it takes care of the outside. Right? Just naturally. If you get this right in here, Jesus said you're going to be fine on the outside. You're going to bear fruit because the inside's right. So let's get the tree right. Verse 6. They love the place of honor at banquets and the chief seats in the synagogues and respectful greetings in the marketplaces and being called rabbi by men. But do not be called rabbi, for one is your teacher and you are all brothers. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your father, he who is in heaven. Do not be called leaders, for one is your leader, that is Christ. But the greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. So you can put that all in a clump here and say it's not the outside again, it's the inside. And it's not the wanting of being important. A lot of times we want the name or the position because it looks good and sounds good. And it's from this text that I think, people have asked me many times, they'll say this, something like this, Pastor, what should we call you? And I said, you can just call me Dave. Amen. You can just call me Dave. That's fine. And that's really, sometimes pastors are put on pedestals. And a lot of times when you get put on a pedestal, be careful because somebody's going to shoot you off it. You're a bigger target when you're on that pedestal. So I'm going to hide behind the pulpit. But we are on a first name basis. Amen. The people of God are. Yes. And we need to remember that. I think if you say, what is the real message? How do we turn this positive? Is that, sometimes that desire of being important is dangerous. Right. That desire of having other people look up to you can be dangerous. Yes. What did Jesus say you should be seen as? Go back to verse, I think it's 11, is it? Verse 11. But the greatest among you shall be your servant. The word servant, basically, if you say, how do I describe that? It's to be a helper. Some people think they're above helping and above serving. You know what I mean? Yes. I'm serious now. Some people, and you'd be surprised at how many people in the church feel that way, or they're important, so important that they shouldn't get down in the trench, or they shouldn't pick up or move chairs or help clean off a table and that. No one is above that. Jesus gave us the example in John chapter 13. What did he do? He girded himself about and he washed the disciples' feet. And what he said, I did this for an example for you. Don't think you're above other people. Don't think you're better than they are. What a danger that is. And so be a servant. And so we need to check ourselves. Let's get real. And realize that God said the greatest is a servant. So the great leaders need to be servant leaders. The great givers should be servant givers. Not give so that everybody say, wow, look at that. Man, he gave more than anybody else gave. No, we should be servant givers. That should be our heart. Greatest pastors should be servant pastors. And that's what should be brought about. And then it says in verse 12 that we're to be humble. It's not like the movie Walking Tall. If anything, it's walking small. Jesus wrote in, and he references all the time, you've heard me say it many times, He rode in on a donkey, lowly on a donkey, right? That's the same word as humble. That's what taipanos is, and it means to be low. And so you're not a hot shot. He did come riding in. I mean, it could have been cool riding in on a chariot with chrome wheels, spokes sticking out that flashed, all decked out with ivory on it and big horses that were special. And people would say, wow, isn't that awesome? The thrill of that. But that's not what Jesus came in on. And no one was more important than him. In one sense, there has been no more grand entry than what he had. Because he performed the very thing he was sent to do. And so we should be humble. And it's important that we're servants and we help. And it's important that we are humble and we're low and not thinking we're hot shots. Right. It's not that you're walking tall, it's that you're walking small. And it's not that you're a hot shot or a big shot. You're just on a first name basis. Amen. Don't call him father, don't call him pastor, don't call him this, leader, don't call him this. You're on a first name basis. And just call him that. Verses 13 to 15. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut off the kingdom of heaven from people, for you do not enter in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers. Therefore you will receive the greater condemnation. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte. And when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourself. Wow. We're supposed to reach out. I want to encourage you to pray about this and be praying for your family and friends. Everyone ought to have some people they're praying for to be saved and to come out and grow. So we need to have the message of Christ, be prepared to share Christ's message of salvation and forgiveness of sin, deliverance and restoration and blessing, because that's what God wants to bring into our life. But we're not to make them like us, we're to make them like him. And the problem is they were making them like themselves. It's a challenge. It's not about you, it's about God. The kingdom of God is not the kingdom of David. And so it's the kingdom of God, and so we want people to be more like God. And so we are not making our proselytes, our converts to our faith and our way and that. I am so cautious at times when people ask me what's most important in some things, because sometimes God has us in areas that for right now the most important thing is for us just to sit at Jesus' feet and learn. Amen. And to be quiet. Right. And be still, for he is God. That might be the most important thing for that person at that time. We have to be very careful that we're not just putting our ideas into this thing. We should be teaching people the traits of Jesus Christ and not the traits of men, and not the things that we honor and respect the most, but that we would see that are most desirable in the life of Christ. And so we need to make converts. That wasn't the problem. The problem is we make them like us. And they're not our disciples. They're supposed to be disciples of Jesus Christ. And so it's not that we give people connection to the church or a connection to us, even though they need to have that connection. But our goal is to give them the connection to Christ, because Jesus can be with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, and we can't be. Matter of fact, we do not want to be. You do not want a disciple always calling you every time they have a little problem, a little owie. You want to teach them, take their owies to Jesus. Amen. We know our children come to us with their owies. They want us to kiss it. They want us to put a Band-Aid on it. Abby is that age right now. Every little owie, she wants a Band-Aid or medicine. So she's always crying out for more medicine. And the medicine now tastes good. So you didn't use, remember methylate when we were kids? You put it on and you didn't want it anymore. You said, oh, it's really okay. Don't put any on, Now it feels good, tastes good, looks cool, and they want it all the time. Well, you don't want to raise a disciple of Christ that way. You want them to, when they have a problem, to take it to Christ. And to learn to do it first and not do it second or third or fourth or fifth. A lot of times we run to parents, we run to friends, we run to other Christian friends, we run to things, and then we think, oh, I should pray about this. Or maybe we're going to bed at night, and then we finally think about it. We need to teach them that when they convert, they don't convert to us, they convert to Jesus Christ. Right? That's a message. Verses 16 to 22. And we're moving pretty good. You're listening fast. Good for you. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple is obligated. Verse 17. You fools and blind men, which is more important, the gold or the temple that sanctified the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the offering on it, he is obligated. You blind men, which is more important, the offering or the altar that sanctifies the offering? Therefore, whoever swears by the altar swears both by the altar and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears both by the temple and by him who dwells within it. We'll stop at 22. And whoever swears by the heavens swears both by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. It's talking about vows. As you said, take them very serious. Your vow in the Old Testament, it was to be taken serious. Your pledges were to be taken serious. I think today the words that we use more than that is we say, I promise. Right? And we remember, maybe we say, I swear. I swear, to God that I will do this thing. Or I swear, and we talk about that. Well, Jesus is basically saying a couple things here. One thing, just fulfill your promise. Let's break it to our language right now. Just fulfill your pledge, your vow, what you're swearing. But fulfill your promise. You say you're going to do something, do it. And but it's not so important where they were and putting importance on, because they had a way of this scapegoat of not fulfilling your promise. And my kids, I hear my grandkids right now as they're growing up in our house, they're already playing this game. And the game is, well, you didn't do this, so I'm not doing this. Right? If you have kids, you know what happens. They're going to do this. Oh, I didn't do that because they don't deserve it. Well, I got news for you. None of us deserve really that much, right? Before God. So it's not about that. It's not about some legal loophole like in our legal system in America today that some attorney's going to find a way out for you. You're not looking for a way out. You're looking to fulfill your promise. And so we should be fulfilling our promise. And there's several ways we should be able to do that. Just as a challenge, is sometimes people come to us, maybe you've had this happen, they say, will you pray for me? And you say, yeah, I'll pray for you. One thing you can do is pray for them right then and there. Take a little bit of time and pray for them there. But a lot of times they go off and say, well, remember to pray for me. Have you had that? People are wanting you to pray for them because something's serious in their life. I think of looking out at people and they said, Pastor, pray for this, so because they're going in the operating, in a couple days, or they're having a MRI, and they want to make sure that when they examine their head that there's something there. And, they're just something not vacant, void, in other words. They wanting to have prayer because of a need that's coming up in their life, and they're asking you to pray. And have you ever promised to pray? You say, sure, I'll do that. Have you forgotten? All of a sudden they came back and they'll say something like, hey, thanks for praying for me. And you go, oh. And they say, man, God really answered our prayers, you know, and you go, ooh. You're sure hoping somebody else was praying because it wasn't your prayer they're answering because you forgot. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, we've all done that. Well, we need to take this promise to pray for them. We need to take it seriously. We need to write it down. We need to do something so we don't forget. If you were seriously asking for prayer, and when we do ask for prayer, it ought to be a serious thing, by the way, but we ought to remember then to pray. Because that's what we want others to be doing for us when we're in that situation. We've had people promise, like, and I don't know how many have on this, that we have these work parties. We have to, by order of the city, get some of these things done on the property, just the weed abatement and that. You might promise to that I'll show up and I'll do something, and then people don't show up. We've had people promise, you know, oh, I'll bring food, I'll bring this, and then they don't even come. We need to keep our promises. We need to keep our vows. And the word vow and pledge really becomes kind of more of a superlative, a bigger thing. But when we promise to do something, Jesus is saying, keep your promise. Fulfill it. Verse 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. But these are the things you should have done without neglecting the others. So what they neglected was justice, mercy, and faithfulness, and what they did was the tithing. Now, tithing, it's pretty clear here that he was still referencing that. And he wasn't just referencing that, but sometimes they got to the point where they had the little seeds from these, and they even tithed that. They were just so careful because it was so important. They thought, oh boy, you know, I'm going to tithe this little bit of this dill. Have you ever seen dill? Have you ever used that in? It's not very big. You know, I don't even know how you would tithe a little jar of dill, you know. They had their little garden because you don't need that much of it in a year's time. But just imagine this, that they were so picky and so legalistic that they were tithing that. But he says, listen, you have, you swallowed a camel and gagged at a gnat. He actually says it in this text. And he says, you know, what are you doing? You're taking these small things and making them so important. But I tell you, there's something else that's more important. What's more important is what's happening in your life with justice and mercy and faithfulness. Right? Look what he says. Now, what is justice? Let me give you a definition of justice. Justice is the execution of rightness. You can say justice is the execution of righteousness. So righteousness is simply, dikaisune is the word that means a standard of law that has been declared as that standard for that country maybe. Well, we're talking about God's standard here, right? I mean, think of this now. So it's the proper execution of God's righteousness. And are we that way? We need to be very careful, he's saying, that we are. And so then it says justice and then mercy. Now, what's mercy? Mercy, leos, is the word that means to show compassion, show pity. A simple way of looking the difference between grace and mercy, and I'm saying this is a simple way, and I wouldn't define it this way, but grace is getting what you do not deserve, and mercy is not getting what you do deserve. Everybody follow that? So mercy would be not getting what you do deserve. And so this says here, he says, be merciful to people, basically. He says, you've omitted this. You tithed even the little tiny things that was so important to you. But then in your lives, you weren't following justice and mercy and faithfulness. Faithfulness is here. Probably a good word, a synonym to use to describe it would be dependability. You are faithful. You are dependable. You follow through. And so he's telling us we better follow through, right? Better be faithful. Faithful in your obligations, faithful in your belief system, faithful in your doctrine, faithful in the things you stand when you're around people. Are you just falling and being the way of the world because it's convenient when you're around the world? You follow me? I want to make sure we hit this because there's something very important. And I don't necessarily think that it was just limited. He said, notice what he says here. Oh, I didn't bring it up. Provision, fourth line down, provisions of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. I think there are other provisions of the law that there is. He's just giving 3 examples. And so I have found something out in these very important. You as a Christian to practice this a lot of times will hurt your relationship with the world. It puts you at odds with the world. As a matter of fact, one way it does it is that if you show love, sometimes people see that as a weakness. If you forgive, people see that as a weakness. If you're giving and helpful and humble and gracious and a servant, they'll see that as a weakness. If you show these in a consistent way, sometimes they see that softness that you have. See, be kind, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. Right? That verse, Ephesians 4:32. They see that in you, and they determine that you are a weak person, when actually there's a great strength in you to show this consistently. And Jesus is saying, listen, this is more important that you're that than that you tithe, deal, and come. And you should have done that. But he says, these are the ones you neglected. And so, wow, what a message for us. And that we have to get this right. See, they say, I remember for men anyway, they said, oh, you got to be lean and mean. And what we need is we need to be sleek and meek. And soft and serve. You know. So this is very clear that we have the wrong opinion sometimes. We have the wrong paradigm, you would say, that mapping process in our mind of right and wrong and things. And Jesus is saying, listen, it's really important for you to, be real in justice, be real in love and forgiveness and faith and that. We've run out of time. I'm going to do this very fast, 25 to 28. See if I can. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but the inside they are full of robbery and self-indulgence. Notice that, self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and of the dish so that the outside of it may become clean also. You see, if you take care of your inside, Jesus taught the outside will be fine. If you take care of the tree, and that's a healthy tree, it will bear fruit. We focus too much on the fruit and not on really what's happening on the inside. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like the whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they're full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Verse 28, so you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Now, just the thing here is be careful that we don't dress up the outside and we've neglected the inside. The goal for us to go from here today would be to say, we're going to take a good look at our insides. We're going to get a spiritual MRI. We're going to have a spiritual x-ray. You know, and if we could only, boy, that would be cool if a pastor could, you know, hey, I know William, could he invent one of those? You know, we could just run it across and say, okay, we're going to take an MRI of you today. Boy, that would be sweet. And it would show up, you know, need mercy or, you know, love more or whatever. That would be great stuff. So work on the inside. It's more important in your life today when you go out of here, not so much how you look to everyone else, but how you really are on the inside. And I'm afraid the inside of most Christians today is a mess. We take care of the inside and we'll take care of the problems in America. We would. Take care of the inside, we'll take care of the problems in our families. We'll take care of the problems in our churches. We need to get real. Get real. And the challenge is that we wake up and take a look at how we're feeling on the inside and how we're thinking through these things. And that'll help. Let me end with this passage now. We got 1 minute. 37 to 39, real quick. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were unwilling. Behold, your house is being left to you desolate. You're being wiped out. You're being like the Bahama Islands. For I say to you, from now on you will not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Wow, you know what I see this text as Jesus ends it after he gives this really kind of, you could say, a harsh message, and he had all those little jewels inside that we tried to look at it positively. This is a great positive ending. And what he's saying, you know what I really want is we really want to be close to you. Amen. Isn't that cool? He says, I wish it was like you see a chicken that all of a sudden there's a threat to her little chicks, and she quick calls out to them and they all come over and she covers them and protects them. Right. He said, that's what I wish. I wish I was close to you, and I wish I could protect you from all the dangers out there. Right. But, you know, we're not going to Christ like that. Right. And that ought to be where we run. And I want to draw you closer to me. You know what the word offering in Leviticus, you start reading Leviticus and you might not get a lot out of it, but there's a lot there actually. You know what the word offering means? It means to draw near. Right. It means a drawing. And so James chapter 4, it says, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. And so that's kind of what's happening on the inside. The most important and the best Christianity we have is inside Christianity. It's not outside Christianity. And yet we focus and we can look at somebody real quick and say, something's wrong there. And we're looking at the outside. But Samuel said, God told Samuel when he was looking for King David there, he said, man looks on the outside, but God looks on the inside. Amen. And that's why in Acts 13:22, he says, I found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my heart, who will do all my will. How's your heart? We're back to the heart. So let's get real. And a great challenge today, really positive. These negative things are floating around, but with the positive things is just work on your inside.